What is up, everybody? Jake, your resident content cowboy here. It's Monday. On Mondays, we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays, we wear pink.
Hey, get out of here!
Oh my god, Danny DeVito, I love your work!
For today's tier list, I'm going to be updating our Miraidon tier list based on the most recent balance patch, and we're also going to be taking a look at some of the meta inside of Pokemon Unite that was updated on Unite API. I thought this might be a fun way to kind of go through this, so we'll take a look at the tier list. At the same time, we'll also talk about some of the win rates and changes on our Unite API here, and I think we should have a good understanding of what the meta is looking like inside of Pokemon Unite right now. Let's get this thing started, shall we? Our tiers, I've actually added a tier here. We have our God tier, where we only put one Pokemon a week. We're not frickin' Norse around here. We have our EX tier. These Pokemon are crazy good, and they're also EX licenses, which I guess means they're supposed to kind of be crazy good. They're weird to place on a tier list, but I will talk about all of these Pokemon. We have our S tier. These Pokemon are insanely good in the game right now. Probably too powerful. Probably. They're the S tier. Way too powerful. Our A+ tier. These Pokemon are also very, very good. I will be moving Pokemon between these tiers. We have our A tier. These Pokemon are extremely solid inside the game. We have our B+ tier, which I didn't want to add because it's very close to something negative, but I think we needed a little variety in here. I'm going to drop some things down from A and move some things up from B. Speaking of the B tier, still got the B tier. Yeah. We've got our C tier. These Pokemon are not doing amazing inside the game right now. And then we have our D tier that is incorrectly named. This is our Decidueye Memorial tier, a tier named after Decidueye when it was so bad it had to have its own tier, and now it is just our D tier. So, what's changed inside of Pokemon Unite? We had some balance changes inside the game, and actually, from a meta perspective, when it comes to win rates, and just from playing the game, you can really feel some of these changes. So, let's start talking about those changes first. Charizard recently received some buffs, and while I don't think this has made Charizard insanely good, I think this was a very reasonable buff given that the muscle band changes hit Char. If I'm being honest, I still think Charizard is on the lower side of the tiers inside of Pokemon Unite. I don't think it's terrible. I think you could put it here in our B tier or in our B+ tier, and that would be somewhat reasonable, but it seems about in line with a lot of the B tier. When I think of the B tier, obviously I get furiously mad, but I also am thinking about Pokemon that are doing good, and if you're good with them, you could do well inside a game. I think Charizard is fine. Again, still on the lower end, and I think still needs some buffs, but I do think this was a nice change, even though it had to counteract a muscle band change. So this is a low B tier for me, possibly C tier still Pokemon inside the game. We had Greedent that got a buff to its Bullet Seed damage. Bullet Seed's bugged in a weird way, so it got a buff to Bullet Seed's damage, but they didn't change the bug. Because of this, I would say this moves Greedent to our D tier. Look, this change didn't change really anything for Greedent. Greedent is still Greedent. It's fine. You could say it's C, whatever. This Pokemon still needs some help inside this game. Maybe it's C. Sure. I guess it's C tier after a change like this. I don't know. I still think this change did almost nothing for this Pokemon. And if you want it to be used as an actual defender inside the game, more of a tank role, I think you're going to need to change something. If you want it to still stay this sort of harasser role, I think you're going to need to give it some buffs, because it's just dealing with a lot of Pokemon that are way more powerful inside the meta right now. I don't think Greedent's doing that well. Scizor and Scyther, on the other hand, are both going to move up to my B+ tier. So it's really interesting, and we can talk about the meta. In fact, this would be a good time to talk about the meta for Scizor and Scyther, because I do think it shows something pretty interesting right here. So if you take a look at the meta, one thing that's for sure is people are excited about this buff. And the highest pick rate of the week is Scizor. Scizor is the most played Pokemon inside of Pokemon Unite, even higher than Miraidon. Now, again, this is for the top 10,000 players, right? But that means people are excited about these buffs and they are checking them out. And then if you find Scizor's win rate, it's slightly under 50%. Not terrible, slightly under 50%. Drilling that down even further, you'll find that Scizor itself is actually doing pretty good. Scizor is over 50 and all of the Scyther builds slightly under 50. The big thing is that Swords Dance is getting a higher win percentage than Double Hit. So even though Double Hit got a buff, it really is Swords Dance that's the big difference maker for this Pokemon in general. And it's a huge change for Scizor. It feels like Swords Dance really was set up for Scizor, even though you can definitely play Double Hit with it to give you more distance. The incredible increase in attack is just so amazingly good for Bullet Punch. It works for Scyther as well, of course, to delete opponents, but Bullet Punch got a huge buff because of this. And now finally, for the first time in a very long time, we have a positive win rate for Scizor. If you look at the win rates for this Pokemon, like it has been 47, 46, 46, 47, 47, 47, 47, 48. And these are just like across the board. It couldn't really break into it. Right now, with both builds together, we're at 49.51, and that's at a high pick rate. So you're getting a lot of great data with that. And again, Scyther is essentially a speedster. Speedsters often struggle in win rate unless they're really good. So these are great numbers for this Pokemon, and I'm excited to see it. I would say it moves it up to our B+ tier. They could probably still do a little more for both of these builds if they wanted it to be crazy powerful, but we're actually in a realm where these Pokemon are doing so much better, and I'm so happy to see it. So they are our first additions to our B+ tier thanks to these buffs. Other Pokemon that were changed, we have some nerfs. Miraidon was nerfed, and I think the nerf was actually a really solid nerf. I'm going to move it into our EX tier, and we'll talk more about Miraidon a little later. It's still an incredibly good Pokemon. Now it feels like its Electro Drift build is really the superstar build, where Charge Beam Thunder lost a lot of its viability, mainly because Thunder is not as broken anymore. Honestly, Thunder was so dummy good. It was like a better Fire Spin. It was just kind of crazy. So Miraidon we can talk more about later. Inteleon received a nerf, and in my opinion, it goes nowhere. It is still an S tier Pokemon. The nerf, I think, is very small. It feels like more of a competitive viability nerf than it does an actual huge nerf to this Pokemon's viability in most every ranked game, right? I really don't think things have changed too much for this Pokemon, but I have not taken a look at its win rate yet. So let me just see what that's looking like and sort of if that's play rate is really affecting it. So where is Inteleon? Inteleon has about an 8.6% play rate. Not super high, not super low. And if we take a look at the Pokemon itself, we can see that, you know what? It actually got hurt pretty good from the win rate perspective. This is the dominant build, and it's under 50% right now. So it might be hurt more than I thought. I feel like when I've been playing it and seeing it, it's still incredibly good. But maybe this is a good case for this Pokemon to move down to our A+ tier right here. However, its win rate has dropped the past 2 weeks. It feels like this is just kind of a normal change, especially from, you know, like a lower pick rate almost. So it seems like people are picking something else. But given this data, and given the fact that it did receive a nerf here, let's go ahead and move Inteleon down one spot. I still don't think this Pokemon is bad at all. But I'm going to move it one spot down to our A+ tier. Another Pokemon that got a nerf is Glaceon. I don't know. Glaceon still looks pretty nuts to me. Its competitive play is still pretty nuts as well. I'm going to take a look at the meta on Glaceon just to see what it's looking like. Glaceon's always been a sub like 50% win rate on this build for some reason. And I don't think it's because the build is bad. I just think it's because it gets so much play. Yeah, it's 48.5% with a little over 50% on Icy Wind Freeze Dry, even though Icy Wind Freeze Dry is not getting picked nearly as much. It definitely hurt it, but it's kind of been going down the past couple weeks, and it's honestly barely a difference between win rates right here. I think Glaceon is still kind of dummy good, but I understand that it's probably lost a little viability from the nerf. I'll move it down one spot here as well. So there's the Glaceon and Inteleon nerfs right there. I still think these things are crazy good, especially with the ease of use of Glaceon. It's just absolutely nuts. I'm trying to think of other Pokemon that received nerfs and buffs. There were a couple others. Oh, Clefable, which is something to talk about. Clefable is still great, but Clefable is not as broken as it was. I think it would be fair to say that Clefable is either A+ or even A tier right now as a supporter. It got a decent nerf to its healing, one that was absolutely deserved, and it also received a nerf to gravity. I think these are fair nerfs, but I don't think it makes this Pokemon bad. Win rates and things like that on supports are always going to be lower than carry Pokemon. One Pokemon, however, that just has a consistently high win rate, I'm going to move it up to our S tier, is going to be Eldegoss. Eldegoss just wins, man. It just wins. I talk about it all the time. I don't even think it's necessarily as broken as some of our other Pokemon right here, but there's no question LD having one of the highest win rates in the game and having a consistently high win rate week after week after week. I just think this Pokemon deserves to be up in a high spot right here. Its pick rate's also decent if I remember right. Yeah, it's one of the higher pick rates in the game. And at some point when the pick rate's that high and the win rate's that high, we just can't deny that this Pokemon is absolutely crazy. And it's doing really, really well in the game right now. Blissey, Comfey, just talking about supports in our A+ tier. I'm not really moving these Pokemon anywhere. Comfey is truly one of the most broken Pokemon in the game, and I hope they nerf it into oblivion, even though its win rate can't really ever reflect that. It's just, it's a nightmare for this game. And then Blissey still getting tons of competitive play and being an insane supporter in its own right. As we take a look at the rest of our tier list here, Tree got buffed, Tree got nerfed. In general, I think Trevenant might be the best defender inside the game right now, alongside Crustle. Crustle I have in my A tier. Honestly, even after the nerfs, I think Crustle may be the best. Like, it's right there with Tree as one of the best defenders in the game. Blastoise isn't going anywhere for me. Blastoise is nuts. The question I do have is what's going on with Umbreon? You know, with a lot of the regions, we're not seeing that much play out of Umbreon, especially North America. And I'm curious, like, I know that Umbreon never had a stellar win rate, but it always was like an extremely useful defender. So let's take a look at what's going on with Umbreon right here. Foul Play Snarl, still the preferred build for me. 51.18% win rate, very high at a 24% pick rate, so a quarter of the time you see this. The Mean Look builds are doing worse, which I don't feel bad about. I don't feel bad about at all. These builds are absolutely insane. Foul Play still having a much better win rate for Umbreon. And if we take a look at the dip right here, it actually did get knocked down about 1.5 points on the win rate, and that's all Mean Look. That's like entirely Mean Look, because Snarl is still doing fine on the Foul Play build. So Umbreon actually looks like it has gotten hurt, and you see that in the competitive landscape as well. I do feel like knocking this down a peg makes a lot of sense to me. I'm going to move it down to our A+ tier. It's still one of the better defenders inside the game, though. And I don't know if there are any other Pokemon that got nerfs. Give me one sec. Okay, great. I just wanted to go over the patch really quick and see if I was forgetting something. I didn't think I was. So let's start talking about every Pokemon on this list real quick, whether they're moving up or down or what I think is going on with them in the meta. Right down here on the bottom, we have Water Bear, Gengar, and Greedent. I don't really see a huge need to move these Pokemon. Yes, I mean, Gengar can carry, so you could see it maybe a little higher in our B tier, but I do think it's in a weird spot for our speedsters. Water Bear, it's fine. The muscle band change actually was positive for this Pokemon, but we don't actually know if that's going to be a permanent change or if that's just kind of a weird bug that this Pokemon is dealing with right now. I could agree that it's probably closer to B right here. In fact, there's a lot going on in the game that it's pretty okay. There are a lot of things that are kind of okay. You know what? I really want to see Water Bear's win rate. Now I just gotta see it. I'm just curious what's going on with this Pokemon right now. Not that this is my only deciding factor, because it really isn't. I'm just curious what's going on with it. Water Bear, the bear in general is at 48%. And let's see how Water Bear's doing. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's still just getting rocked out there. You know, you can play well with it. It's a high skill Pokemon, but it's still just getting rocked. I'm just going to keep it where it is. As far as the Pokemon in my B tier right here, Sableye, yeah, it's a good supporter for what it does, even though you don't see it played well. I don't think Char is crushing it right now, but I could see a reality where maybe it's B+. I think it still needs buffs. Tyranitar is fine. Needs a lot to get online, which is frustrating when you compare it to some other choices. Azu is fine. Doesn't need as much to get online, but kind of falls off late. Machamp is fine. These are all like good Pokemon, but they're not amazing. I'm going to be moving Sword up one rung. I've been playing a little bit more with Sword lately, and I've been seeing more of it competitively. I think Aegislash is really good, even though it feels like it's kind of been forgotten. Gyarados, on the other hand, has a consistently high win rate for its premier build, Dragon Breath Bounce, and it's getting competitive play. I'm moving Gyarados up to our A tier right now. Now, here's the thing. Gyarados gets punished. So you're going to run into some games where Gyarados is a liability, but also when it gets online, it really does outperform a lot of these all-rounders. Goodra, not much changes with Goodra. I could see someone arguing that Goodra is even lower tier than this, but I think in most games it's still a decent choice, even though it doesn't have the displacement that you'd want out of a lot of defenders. Snorlax is fine. I think it's a solid middle of the road defender. Same with Mamoswine, same with Lapras. We saw some teams pick Lapras up recently, and I guess I'm curious to see how Lapras is doing in the overall meta. I like seeing like what teams are doing with it competitively, but that doesn't always translate to what's happening in all of our games right here. So Lapras has one of the lowest win rates in the game. It's about to be expected, and I assume its pick rate is also extremely low. One of the lowest pick rates in the game, which means our data is not really good on this. I was just curious. Yeah, Water Pulse Ice Beam is about what I would expect for the better build for this. But again, with such a low pick rate, it's hard to get really good information about Lapras right now. I think it's fine. It feels like it's fine. Duraludon, Greninja, Cinderace, A9, Candle. I don't really feel the need to change the position of a lot of these Pokemon. Greninja is a solid carry. It's weird. So Greninja and like all of these carry Pokemon are going to provide good value if you can carry well with them. The problem with a Pokemon like Greninja is the same problem with a Pokemon like Zoroark. It's the same problem, you know, with any of these higher sort of input Pokemon, things that take a higher level of skill. I do think in general, these carries are all decent. You could say they're slightly B+, but I also feel like they're fine. And when I think about them, I think, yeah, they're fine. If someone's really cracked on it, they're good. I think they're fine, and that's where I'm going to keep them, honestly. I don't really feel the need to move them much. Yes, you can carry with these Pokemon. They're a liability oftentimes in lane, and I don't think most players are good with them, even though all you need to really worry about is your spacing. And I do think there's just other auto attackers that are better. Let's see. A9, Candle. Yeah, that's about where I'd put them. Maybe Candle is slightly better. Maybe I could say it's like B+ or something like that. Our B+ tier, I just moved some Pokemon to this. Our A tier, Mime is staying for me. I think Mime's doing great. Hoopa's very, very solid. Better and competitive, obviously. Wiggly, I think, is being slept on a little bit, doing pretty well. Clefable, its win rate tanked, but every time something is broken and then gets nerfed, you see its win rate tank. You even see that with Miraidon, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And it's not just that the Pokemon is terrible now. It's that all of the people who were cheesing it and not very good with it, they were just running it because they knew it was so strong, are kind of having, they're not having as good of results as they used to, right? Zoroark, Zeraora, Talon, Absol, Dodrio. I'm going to split up our speedsters here a little bit on this tier list because I think there are some differences here. I would say Absol and Zeraora, I'm going to move down to my B+ tier. I do think these Pokemon are kind of criminally underplayed inside the game, but in general, speedsters just don't win because people are not good with them. Talon, getting more comp play than I expected. I love to see it, and it's a good counter to some of the things that are inside the game right now, especially things like Glaceon. Anything sure hit, anything that you would love to just avoid for a little bit, Talon is very, very good into. Zoroark, Dodrio. Dodrio just keeps winning, and Zoroark is still insanely good. They are played... Zoroark is played at a very low rate. Or not low rate. At a very players who play Zoroark aren't that great, except for the ones that are actually good on it, and then that thing is nuts. I'm moving Zoroark up into our A+ tier. I'm also going to move Dodrio up into our A+ tier. I'm going to keep Talon in the A tier as a speedster. Obviously, we just moved Gyarados up. Dark Bear, I think, is kind of still sitting here. A seems fine to me. Dragonite, I still think is A. Very good. Zarina, I'm going to move down to our B+ tier. You just don't see it that much. However, if you're cracked on it, you're nuts. Please don't buff it. Not that I control it, but dude, like the last patch, I called out except for really one big thing, which we'll get to. Almost everything I talked about was in the last patch. So if you're listening, developers out there, don't buff Zarina. It's fine. It's in the B+. That's where it should be. Lucario is also kind of in this weird spot right here. I think A is not bad. It's getting a lot of comp play too. It just isn't that cool of a choice anymore. I mean, I really do think that's what's the deal with Lucario. What's the deal with Lucario? It's just not a cool choice, but it is still really strong. Garchomp is strong. Players aren't playing it, but and players gonna play him, but they're not playing Garchomp. The rest of our A tier, Venusaur is great. It has been struggling in the meta recently, like from a win rate perspective, if I remember right. Let me take a look at where Venusaur is at right now. I feel like every time I see it, it has kind of a low win rate, which is surprising to me. Yeah, it's one of the lowest in the game right now. And its pick rate is not terrible. So obviously Venusaur is hurting right here as I click on Urshifu. Obviously Venusaur is hurting right now inside the meta. I think one issue is people are playing this. Sludge Bomb is not the way to play this Pokemon for the most part, because things can jump in on you. You need to play Giga Drain, Solar Beam, but even that is not crushing it inside the meta right now. So we obviously have had some really strong Venusaur moments, but in general, Venusaur is just not setting the game on fire right now. That's interesting. Maybe we can move Venusaur down a peg, because it has had kind of a prolonged period of not really going nuts. However, in competitive play, it's had some really, really big moments. Let's move Venu down one level right here. Cram, Sylveon, Espeon, these are all still incredible. I actually think Espeon, I'm moving up to my A+ tier. Cram's going to stay where it is. Sylveon, I probably can move up as well. These EVs are just so nuts. I think I'm moving Sylveon up. I'm moving Mew up as well. I'm keeping the rest. I'm keeping Delphox, Gardevoir, and Decidueye. The biggest thing about all three of them is their mobility is just awful, and it makes them a bit of a liability. But in general, I think, you know, everything in the A tier is good, and I think they're doing pretty well. Our A+ tier, Blissey's going nowhere. Maybe even higher. Blissey's insane. Comfey is insane. It's just, there's no way to explain how overpowered the concept of this Pokemon is. As a concept, it's the most overpowered thing inside the game. Sometimes in practice, that doesn't mean it's going to be the case, but it really is just one of the most broken concepts in Unite. Slowbro, Umbreon, hanging out where they are, very good. Mimikyu, Blaziken, Metagross, I don't think are going anywhere. They're all great all-rounders. Mimikyu and Blaziken getting a decent amount of competitive play. Feels like Metagross has a harder time. I think Metagross is an absolute beast in non-coordinated games. It's so tough to take down. Mew, Sylvie, Espy, we talked about this. Pikachu, I think, is so much better than people think. It's not getting play, and I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it's not doing amazing here, but I do think this Pikachu build just, it's so incredibly good. Electro Ball, Volt Tackle, almost at 50% right here. And it's a point and click, almost supporter attacker build. I'm going to move it down one, because without question, I think it's nuts, but it's not getting enough play to really say that it's like that ultra competitive. I think it's crazy though. I honestly do. It's pretty mean. Dragapult, still Dragapult, great. In competitive play, you're not seeing it, but it's honestly still insanely powerful. Inteleon, Glaceon, yeah, I think this is fair. Even after the Glaceon nerfs, this thing is still just doing great. Dodrio, Zoroark just moved up. Leafeon and Meowscarada, I'm moving up into our S tier. Leafeon and Meowscarada are crazy good. I wasn't sure how good the Meowscarada buffs were. It's really the Unite move buff that's absolutely insane. And then Leafeon, kind of missing any nerfs to get a buff is a pretty wild situation. LD just moved up to our S tier. Buzzwole. Talk about you in a minute. The rest of our defenders we've talked about. Let's talk about our EX Pokemon. I think all of our EX Pokemon are doing very well. Probably Mewtwo X being the most underwhelming. Miraidon's Charge Beam Thunder also a little underwhelming, well, compared to what it was. If I were to make any of these Pokemon God tier, it would either be Mewtwo Y or Zacian. I think they're probably the best out of these. Electro Drift Miraidon is up there as well. And then Mewtwo X is just crazy good, but I don't think it's God tier. I think all 4 of these Pokemon are probably S tier right now, with Mewtwo Y being the closest to our God tier. But I'm going to put Buzzwole in our God tier because Buzzwole, in my opinion, it's criminal that it escaped the nerfs. I can't believe it did. It is the best top laner in the game in competitive play. And I mean, I truly think there are things that the EX Pokemon do that are a little more broken than this at times. But the fact that this all-rounder deals this much damage, has a shield, has an execute on its Unite move, is good at level 0 and unbelievably busted at level 5, plays well inside the lane, has more CC than a defender, like, Buzzwole, buddy, you're absolutely nuts. So that's my opinion of what's going on inside the meta right now. All of our EX Pokemon are still crushing it. Our S tier Pokemon are very, very good. I've moved some things around that I thought I maybe overvalued and moved some things up that I undervalued. In general, I would love to see a lot of buffs and changes for things in our B and C tier, and I would love to see some slight nerfs for things in our EX, God tier, S tier, and maybe some of the A+ tier. I actually kind of don't hate a lot of the positioning of Pokemon in the A+ tier. You're going to have a game with things that are really good and things that are kind of close but not as good. I'm fine with that. Probably our B and C tier could use love more than some of our top line things could use some nerfs, even though there are some good nerfs you could make out of that S tier and the AX Pokemon for sure. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think of kind of analyzing the meta and everything like that. Let's just take a quick snapshot of the meta before we go, so we can talk through it a little bit right here, and I'll give you my take on it. So there was our tier list, and now let's just talk about our meta. Highest win rate of the week is going to be Mewtwo Y, with, I believe, a decent pick rate at only 8.6%, but Mewtwo Y is still insanely good. Zacian right up there at 52.46%. The buffs it got were very good. Dodrio, always being Dodrio. I'm sure its pick rate is terrible. Yeah, it's one of the lower pick rates in the game, but people who play Dodrio usually are pretty good at it. Meowscarada is a good one to point out here. We'll talk about Garchomp here in a sec. Meowscarada, high win rate, high pick rate. That is a very strong Pokemon. Garchomp, high win rate, but usually a very low pick rate, which is why it gets so high. Yeah, just like Dodrio. There are Dodrio one tricks and Garchomp one tricks. They're really, really good, and then most people don't play the Pokemon. Let's look. Gyarados doing pretty well, and I think its pick rate is going up slightly. Okay, so it's almost at 7% pick rate, and it's only that one build. If you take a look at Gyarados, like, everything else is not doing well, but Dragon Breath Bounce is doing pretty well inside the game. And then as you kind of go down our list here, Charizard with a decent win rate right now and getting a decent pick rate. So the buffs are actually doing pretty well for Char, only on one build, really. It's the Flamethrower Fire Blast build. I'm so happy to see Char doing well again. So that's great. I still think they could do a little bit more for this Pokemon, because I think if you saw this thing up at a, 18% pick rate, it would not have a consistent win rate like this. Mewtwo X doing pretty well. Cram. Tyranitar is always doing good or bad, just depending on how the T-Tar games go that week, because its pick rate's like 1.8%. You get almost no information from this. It's the unfortunate thing is, like, sure, its win rate's high, but it really never got played. Mew doing well, not surprising. I think Mime's doing pretty good. Anything on here that I think is kind of a standout that is interesting? Well, of course, we're going to talk about it, and it's Miraidon. Miraidon has a 50.42% win rate with almost a 20% pick rate. You get a lot of great data for this. So here's what happened with Miraidon. Its most busted build, Charge Beam Thunder, with its highest pick rate, was nerfed, and it needed to be, and honestly, good. It was way too good. Electro Drift Parabolic Charge is still a 52.52 win rate. 52.52% win rate right there. What has happened is everyone has now unlocked Miraidon, so you're getting a lot of people playing Miraidon sort of for the first time. They're trying what used to be the most broken build, Charge Beam Thunder, and they're getting okay results. I am so happy to see this Pokemon in line with something like this. If Miraidon stays right around here, a little over 50, 51%, I would be so happy with that release. You know, we had months, I think, of Mewtwo-Y, like over a month easy of Mewtwo-Y just being the most broken thing in the game and it not being like close at all. So I'm so happy to see Miraidon in that position, honestly. We don't want releases that are this broken that they just ruin the game for long periods of time. And then if you look at the kind of the lower win rates in the game, Glaceon's hurting a little bit, but it was to be expected after the nerfs. Inteleon dropping farther than I would think, but there we go. Leafeon is never a good example of how good this Pokemon is. For whatever reason, this Speedster does so insane and competitive and in the hands of a good player and really poorly in the hands of a bad player. I don't know why. And then Clefable being maybe the biggest story of the drop in win rate here. Clefable going down to 46.96%. As we take a look at this Pokemon right here, Moonlight, Gravity, both moves were nerfed, and it's the biggest drop right here. Moonlight Follow Me still almost 50%, which is pretty impressive. But you can see this here. It had a total win rate of 50%, and now it has a total win rate of 46.9. So Glaceon and Clefable receiving the biggest nerfs from our last balance patch. Again, tell me what you think in the comments. I'm trying to like gesture to it, but it's always reversed and my brain never works. There's our tier list for this week. I love you all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I will see you all next time. Nerf. Well, there's some things to nerf for sure.